What is up, guys? Welcome to the show. Before we hop into the Q&As, I just wanted to announce this weekend there is a sale on the TTM website. The entire soft bundle, which includes 4 different programs, 1 ebook, is 30% off. You can use the code SOFT30, no space, for that discount, and that will go through the weekend. Essentially, what's included is both Jack Gazelle's, both hybrid programs, a 2 and 5 mile run program, as well as my SFAS prep program and the soft prep recovery guide ebook, which is a 67-page ebook talking all about nutrition, recovery, sleep, and all the things that will make your experiences on any of these programs better. So if you're in the market for a new program, go check those out. Links will be in the show notes. And other than that, have a great weekend and enjoy the show.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Terminator Training Show. I am Kevin Smith, and today is going to be a Q&A episode from the second half of my Instagram Q&As from last week. Okay, now that that's out of the way, for those not in the loop, I got a recent comment on a YouTube video from one of my older videos. It was my Q course / SFAS experience video. One of my, I think it was like episode 130 or 131, where someone just recently watched it and said, "Hey bro," I think he said, "Hey bro," or "Hey dude, I think we can all tell that you're trying to make your voice sound extra deep." Like it was obvious that I was trying to fake the depth of my voice. And for those of you who have been listening for a while and or those of you who have seen me in person, I'm either really, really freaking good at it and I do it 100% of the time, or that's just how my voice sounds. So I was doing a little bit of an intro with a weird high-pitched voice that hopefully you guys found funny, but that is the main reason for it. Figured I'd start us off with a little bit of a laugh. If you got a little laugh out of that, mission success. So today is actually, yes, going to be a Q&A episode from the second half of my Q&As from last week. I did not get to all of them, and I am going to be packing and getting ready for a trip to Austin, Texas, where I leave tomorrow morning. So the rest of the day is going to be kind of errands and packing and getting ready for that, getting the house ready and getting the pups ready for our dog sitter who is coming over to watch them for a few days. I'll be in Austin from tomorrow, Thursday afternoon, through Sunday midday or so. I have I've been doing a coaching program, a group coaching program, and the culminating event is everyone's getting together, or everyone who can from the program is getting together, and we are going to do some in-person stuff. We're going to do some learning. We're going to get some good guest speakers that are going to hopefully provide us with a lot of value. And then we are actually going to do some business development stuff on the second day. And also we get to go and work out at a few really, really nice gyms. 2 out of the 3 gyms I'm aware of. One is the Collective, which is a newer gym in Austin that's super duper nice. Lots of YouTube influencers and whatnot work out there, but it's a great gym. Like I said, relatively new. And one of my coaches, Luca Hosevar, is friends with the owner of that gym. So we got that gym booked out, and we also have the On It gym booked out for Sunday. We're going to be going in, getting a workout in. For those of you who are not aware, the On It gym is one of the OG gyms most people are aware of. On It, founded by Joe Rogan, and can't remember the other guy's name that founded it, but he's friends with Luca. For those of you who don't know, Luca Hosevar is one of the best in the business, in the fitness business, and he has a lot of connections. So looking forward to that. Should be awesome. Never been to Austin, and I've heard it's a pretty good spot. Definitely going to get some barbecue. Definitely going to continue to do my ultra prep. It definitely adds a little bit of an extra obstacle packing my stuff. Usually I pack pretty minimalist, but I have to bring some running stuff and kind of think through laundry and things of that sort. And also I've been looking at trails that are somewhat close to my hotel. There's not a ton of trails. It's right in the middle of the city, but there are some decent spots to run. I might not get perfect trail running in, and even if I have to go and run some on a treadmill, I will, because unfortunately miles can't run themselves. And I've got not only the ultra to prep for in April, but I'm also doing in a couple of weeks on, I think it's the 21st or 22nd of February, I'm doing a 20 miler here in North Carolina. So that is going to be next up on the list. So I am prepping for that. So got to go and put the miles in. And also we're going to be training quite a bit. So I'm not really used to training more than a couple times a week. And I did a training session yesterday, deadlift session, full body session. And then I'll have probably another couple of workouts later this week as part of the group event. So should be an awesome weekend, bringing the wife along too. She's definitely a behind the scenes part of my business, and she helps me a lot with a lot of things, non-fitness related, but things that I don't really enjoy doing or I don't have the bandwidth to do. And she just helps me for free, and it's amazing. Trying to convince her to come over to the dark side and quit her real job and officially work for me or with me. But that hasn't quite happened yet. We'll see what happens in the future. So anyway, those are the quick updates. I'm going to get to some questions here. Let's get into it. I sleep very consistently, but due to work, I have to work until 4 a.m. one day per week. Am I cooked? No. If it's just one day per week, obviously it's not perfect, but if you are consistent, like you said you are on the other days, and one day you kind of get thrown off your schedule, then you're not as cooked as maybe someone else who would maybe be working a couple overnight shifts a week and maybe a couple day shifts. Or if you are a shift worker where you work night shifts and you don't stick to that schedule, even on your non-work days, like your sleep wake schedule, that can be a little bit rough. As well as even if you are a shift worker and you do stick to that schedule, which I would recommend if you at all possibly can, even though it's not perfect, it's still not ideal for human health to be awake at nighttime and sleep during the day. We are diurnal animals, which means we are supposed to sleep at night and we're supposed to be awake during the day. And it's not the end of the world, especially if you're only doing it for a temporary period of time, but it's still not ideal. And that's not just my opinion. That's based on lots and lots of data. Shift work is a class something carcinogen. In other words, it is just as detrimental to your health as some things that you might know as carcinogens. It may not be as bad as drinking and smoking on a regular basis, but it is still a little bit detrimental to your health. Now, if you're doing it once a week like you are, it's going to probably throw you off a couple days after, just depending on what your normal sleep looks like and what your sleep looks like that day and so on and so forth. But really the best recommendation, even if you do have a worse situation than this, say you're doing this a couple nights a week, or one of those examples I had earlier, your best bet is to not necessarily think too much about like how potentially detrimental it may be, because that's just going to make things worse. What you should think about is what you can do to kind of combat it. And there are, of course, sleep is very, very important, and it's critical to making good food decisions. It's critical to your metabolic and hormone health. It's critical to feeling good mentally and physically, recovery, and so on and so forth. But also there are other components to that. Your nutrition, your training, your activity levels, your stress levels, your basically the way you go about life, your relationships. Those are all very big factors in your overall health and well-being, in your performance and your recovery and reaching your goals and just being content and fulfilled in life. So if you are in a situation where no matter what, you can't control your sleep perfectly in this case, or really in any case, do your best on the nights that you can control it. And also do your best to be as dialed in as possible with the other aspects of health and well-being. And you're going to mitigate as much damage as possible. And I'm assuming you're probably not going to be doing this forever. So doing this for a short period of time is not a huge deal. You know, if you're going to go to SF, there's going to be times where your sleep is going to be just all over the place. That's just the nature of the job, which is not a great aspect of it. It's just a reality that you got to prepare for. Of course, when you are in garrison and you are kind of in a lull in training and traveling and things like that, you definitely can take sleep pretty seriously. You can get pretty consistent sleep if you choose to do so, but there will be times where it's just beyond your control, and you just got to do your best and just roll with the punches. And yeah, that's my best advice for you. Best of luck, but you're definitely not cooked. Just keep working and keep staying consistent on your nights that you can and getting after it. So best of luck. Next question, hopping off T850 to your 2 and 5 mile run program. I bulked the last 2 to 3 months. Should I maintain or cut during the 2 and 5 mile? So bulking on a run program, although it's not necessarily a no-no or against the rules, generally speaking, unless you are trying to get jacked and gain muscle, in which case I wouldn't necessarily choose my 2 and 5 mile run program as your first option, just because it's a more running bias program, not so much a hybrid program. Although there is lifting, you can maintain strength for sure. And some people do gain strength. Usually bulking while running is not the best combination. On the flip side, going in a serious cut while running, if you have a lot of weight to lose, it absolutely can help, just because the smaller you get, so long as you're not doing anything crazy like eating in a 1,000+ calorie deficit, or not eating enough protein, or cutting carbohydrates before you cut other macros like fat, you're usually going to see, if anything, maybe some improvements for running. Now, if you just have a little bit of weight to lose, you just want to get a little leaner, you could either hang out at maintenance during that program. And what you might find is a little bit of a body recomposition going on, which kind of takes a while. And it's hard to see the differences unless you're like very diligent with your photos, your progress photos, your weighing. Maybe you get body fat percentage tests periodically and so on and so forth. But also, even if you do just stay at maintenance and you stay around the same body composition, you're going to be ensuring that you fuel your performance really well. However, you could also consider cutting. If you bulked and you got gained a decent amount of muscle, gained a decent amount of strength, but also with that, which usually happens with a bulk, you gained a little bit of body fat, and you go into a reasonable cut while you're doing that program. Of course, trying to make sure that you are keeping your carbohydrates high, keeping your protein high. If anything, you want to cut fat first. Of course, you don't want to go too low in fat, but that's very, very rare. And you can eat pretty low fat, especially for a short period of time, and be totally fine. You just want to get your minimum fats in. Usually for most men, somewhere around 0.35 to 0.4 grams of fat per pound of body weight, if you're relatively lean, is a pretty good, solid, healthy area to be. You could get down to 0.3, you can get down to 0.25 for short periods of time. I wouldn't necessarily recommend going that low. It's kind of hard to eat that way, and that would be not something I follow for a really long time. And of course, there's nuance to it, but if you're keeping your carbs high, you're fueling your training sessions well, and you're eating plenty of protein, and you're being reasonable with your training. Of course, the program I created, I made it to be reasonable, effective, but reasonable and challenging for sure, but also not crazy, crazy high volume or crazy high just workload in general. Then you should be totally fine. So it really just depends on what you're going to go for. If you really want to improve your running and you've got, you have some body mass to lose, then it might be a good idea to cut. If you are pretty happy with your body composition, you're pretty happy with your weight, you still absolutely can make great progress on that program if you eat around maintenance. And lastly, you also could potentially, even if you're in a surplus, I know you just finished a bulk, so the question asker is not going to be a surplus, but just for other people listening, you can follow a run program in a slight bulk and be okay. But usually maintenance or in a slight deficit would be the best option for the run program. Just whatever you do, don't go too extreme with it, because running definitely requires a good amount of fuel. And there's, like I said, also lifting in there. And if you're interested in maintaining the muscle mass and the strength that you built on your bulk, then I would absolutely kind of tread carefully and be very reasonable with it. Maybe do some calorie cycling, which I've talked about a lot in the past, essentially eating a little bit more, usually in the form of carbs on your higher workload training days, a little bit less by usually dropping a little bit of fat, maybe a little bit of carbs on your moderate output training days, and eating even less, really creating most of your deficit on your rest days combined with your moderate output training days. Usually you're going to be pretty good to go. You kind of look at your calories on a weekly basis rather than a daily basis. So those are some things I would recommend. Just kind of depends on your situation, but whatever you choose, best of luck and enjoy the program. Next question. I increased my cadence from 152 to 165 and I got IT band issues right after. Shouldn't increased cadence be better for injury prevention? Yes, hypothetically, in most scenarios, if your cadence is low, which 152 is definitely low for pretty much anyone, and you go up to 165, it should hypothetically be better for injury prevention, performance, you're going to run faster, and so on and so forth. However, that's just one variable. There are tons and tons of different variables as well. Additionally, what I would guess, oftentimes when I see people getting banged up or getting injuries or getting overuse issues from increasing their cadence, oftentimes it's because they increase it too quickly. So for example, you're running 152, and if you try and increase it to 160, 165, 170, which is usually a good consideration and a good thing to shoot for. But if you try to do that in a couple of weeks or a couple of runs, or say you're running 152 and you put your metronome app on, which is a app that plays a beat at a certain cadence. You can kind of type in which cadence you want and it'll play that beat in your headphones. It's a good like training wheel type thing. If you do that one time in one run or two runs, that is just a massive drastic difference that your body is just not going to be used to. And that's often even worse than just staying at that low cadence, just because anytime you subject yourself to a novel stimulus, especially if it's like a very significant 13 steps per minute stimulus over one or two runs or even a couple of weeks, your body's just not going to be used to it. It's not going to be adapted to it, and it can cause a lot of problems. So if you did that, that's probably a factor. What I would recommend if you are looking to increase your cadence, just anyone listening, I would recommend trying to shoot for like 1 to 2 steps per minute per run over time. And even if you don't get it perfectly every single run, it should be some sort of trend. Like if right now your cadence is 152, and if 8 weeks from now it's 160, you're doing pretty well. And then maybe 4 weeks after that, it's 163, 164, doing pretty well. But if it's just one run, then you're definitely going to run into a lot of problems, even though hypothetically increasing your cadence is generally a better way to run. It allows you to land underneath your midline, and you're less subject to overstriding. That being said, even if you do that, it's still possible. Running is still a potentially injurious activity. So even if everything is going right, even if you are slowly but surely making your way up, there are lots of other variables that can result in any sort of issues like IT band syndrome, runner's knee, shin splints, stress fractures, and any number of different running related issues. So it is not the solve all, but it's usually something to consider. It's a very low hanging fruit for a lot of people to kind of increase their cadence over time. And that can solve just a lot of other issues that people talk about: heel striking, overstriding, running injuries, and so on and so forth. It's just like kind of a blanket thing to consider to improve your running, not only injury risk, but also improve your running ability and make your running economy, basically the energy expense for running fast or running at whatever pace you're going at, lower. So I would consider the fact that you might have increased it too fast, but even if you did that over time, it's still possible to hurt yourself with running. So hopefully you're on some sort of rehab plan, or hopefully you have dialed back the running a little bit and opted for some lower impact stuff. You still can run when you have IT band syndrome. It's not quite the same as things like shin splints and runner's knee, where you just have to stop it at all costs. But there are many, many different factors that can go into it, and it's not just cadence. But overall, I would consider continuing to work at increasing your cadence, and that kind of goes for anyone. There's no magic number. A lot of people throw around the number 180. You guys have probably all heard that. And although that's a decent number to shoot for some people, what I usually recommend is if you're like below 170, try and get up to 170-ish. If you're very, very tall, like 6'4", 6'5", you might be a little lower than that. If you're very, very short, you might be a little bit higher than that, or a lot higher than that. But somewhere give or take 180 is usually pretty good. And this is also for assuming you're running at a pretty hard, fast clip. Your cadence with easier stuff is going to be a little lower usually than your cadence with faster, more intense runs. It shouldn't be that big of a gap, but it should usually in most cases be a little bit 5 to 8 steps per minute lower. So if it's not, you could also consider trying to increase your cadence on easy runs. A lot of people, believe it or not, hurt themselves on easy runs more so than faster, harder runs. And oftentimes it's because they have a completely different running form, running mechanics, running basically a mindset towards running, almost like they're shuffling rather than running. Just because you're going slow doesn't mean you're not running. You don't have to completely change your running form up. Now, this is all easier said than done, but your running should be pretty similar. Obviously your slow run pace, your mechanics aren't going to look exactly the same as if you're running 100 meters as hard as you can, sprinting. They're not going to even look the same at a zone 2 run versus running a mile all out or 2 miles all out. There will be some difference for sure, but they shouldn't be that drastically different. It shouldn't be like two different activities. And in a lot of cases they are. So I definitely would recommend trying to work on your skills, do some strides, do potentially some drills, ensure that you're not trying to make too drastic improvements in short periods of time, and continue to kind of rehab and get that IT band feeling better, and you'll be on your way. Next question, why or why not do the run portion after the lift on Gazelle 1.0? So there are a couple days throughout the week, I believe it's Monday and Thursday, where there are 2 sessions. There's a lift plus a run. And I would always, in every case, no matter what your goals are, I would always do the lift before the run. It is much safer that way. And doing a lift before a run is going to negatively affect your run a lot less than doing your run before your lift. I've talked about this before, but the main reasons for this are, one, running, especially because both of these runs, Monday and Thursday, are both higher intensity runs. So they're going to be more fatiguing. They're going to drain your glycogen a little bit more. They're going to dehydrate you a little bit more. They're going to beat your joints up a little bit. They're not going to beat your joints up necessarily. Well, some people they might, but if you're pretty sound with your running mechanics and reasonable, they're not going to beat your joints up necessarily, but they can absolutely result in a little bit of joint inflammation. That's just the nature of running. It's a heavily eccentric, high impact activity. And when you do that before going into a lift where you want to be, it's also going to mentally fatigue you. And when you go into a lift, especially the Monday session where you're lifting pretty damn heavy, like high percentage of your 1RM for the most part, being mentally fatigued, glycogen depleted, slightly dehydrated with inflamed joints going into a high intensity lift session is just not the condition that you want to be in going into a lift. Now, lifting before running also will dehydrate you a little bit. It will make you a little bit mentally fatigued. It will inflame your joints potentially a little bit, and it will drain your glycogen slightly, but way less so. And because running involves less like heavy focus, as opposed to when you have a very heavy bar on your back or in your hands or whatever lift you're doing, you can be a little bit more mentally fatigued going into that. You're just going out and running. And if you've been running for a while, it's pretty automatic. You're not really thinking about all the little intricacies, and it's not quite as mentally stressful as doing a 3RM or a high percentage of your 1 rep max, 3 sets of 3. So because of that, I would suggest doing the lift prior to the run. But again, if you want to split them into 2 sessions, then it doesn't matter as much, because assuming you're getting some good rest and fuel and hydration in between the 2, say you run first thing in the morning and you do your lift later in the day and you've had a couple of meals, you've had plenty of hydration, maybe you've relaxed a little bit, maybe you've even taken a nap. I know naps are not possible for everyone throughout the day, and you don't have to take a nap. That's just an example. You're going to still be able to go into that lift feeling pretty good and mentally prepared and a little bit less glycogen depleted, less joint stress because you've had that recovery time, and you're going to be better hydrated, just more ready to perform in that training session. So TLDR, either split them up into 2 sessions and you can do them in either order, whichever you prefer. Or if you're doing them in the same session, which is also totally fine, I would do the lift, then the run. And also, one last thing about doing the lift, then the run, is during the lift, it allows for easier maintenance of your glycogen and your hydration. You can literally sip on intra-workout fuel with hydration between every single set if you want. So that's what I would absolutely recommend doing. I would definitely bring some sort of intra-workout carbohydrate, some electrolytes, and of course some water where you mix it in. You can even have like a goo packet at the end of your lift before you go into your run. Even though the runs are relatively short, you're still expending quite a bit of energy in that lift, and you want to be at least mostly topped off glycogen wise and carbohydrate wise and hydration wise going into that run. So I would absolutely consider doing some intra workout. And it just is, you can do that during a run for sure, but it's a lot easier to kind of keep it topped off. Running, you're kind of playing damage control. You're not going to be easily able to keep your glycogen completely topped off and keep your hydration completely topped off during a run. It's kind of like mitigating how much you lose. During a lift, you absolutely can, especially if you're well fueled going into that training session. It's just not going to burn through as much of your energy stores, your substrates, as doing a run prior to. So that would be one more consideration, but yeah, that's what I recommend. Next question, what is the difference between Gazelle and Gazelle 2.0? Yeah, so I was thinking about making a full episode on this, but I guess I'm going to talk a little bit about it in detail here. It won't take too long, but honestly, the differences are not crazy intricate. They're not super complicated. Gazelle, we'll talk the first one, the original Gazelle, version 1. That one is more of a powerlifting specific and endurance specific program. You're not going to see many jumps. You're not going to see many throws. You're not going to see any agility. You're not going to see any metcons. You're not going to see any strongman sessions. It's pretty much just lifting and conditioning. And the lifting more specifically is geared towards powerlifting, building your big three: bench, squat, deadlift. Of course, there's definitely some accessories and you're going to build muscle on it too. But that is kind of the main focus of that program. It's less well-rounded than Jack Gazelle version 2. Now let's get into Jack Gazelle version 2. Jack Gazelle version 2 is less of a powerlifting, squat, bench, deadlift focus program. It is much more of a hypertrophy focus program. There are definitely some strength focused exercises, and you will squat, bench, and deadlift throughout the program at some point. But there are more options for using specialty bars. There are more options for using more joint friendly style lifts, machines, and so on and so forth. You'll see intensity techniques. You'll see drop sets, rest pauses, myo reps. You'll see more isolation movements. You'll also see more power. So you'll do some jumps, you'll do some throws, and kind of building that ATP PC energy system that goes away pretty quickly when you don't use it. Of course, doing heavy lifts also will build that system, but this is more of like a power consideration where you're doing actual rate of force development, fast jumps and skips and hops and so on. Additionally, you will also see, while it is still running specific, it's more running specific than Jack Gazelle version 1. Jack Gazelle version 1 has lots of different options for different types of cardio. Although you could do that for sure in version 2, it doesn't necessarily have those listed out as specifically. So it's a lot more run biased. And then there's also an option for the weekend sessions to do a ruck. Additionally, you're going to see a Metcon or a strongman session on most weeks throughout that program. And that is not part of Jack Gazelle version 1. So I would say version 2 is 3 years later. So I have a lot more programming experience when I created Jack Gazelle version 2. So I just am more savvy with it and I can make things a little bit more optimal and a little bit more, I would say, like high level, like very, very high level programming compared to just Jack Gazelle version 1. Don't get me wrong. Version 1 is by far my best seller of all time. It has been out a lot longer than version 2, but I get lots of great feedback on that program. And I've followed it myself like plenty of times in the past. Not the exact like exercise for exercise program, but like that was what my training looked like for probably about 5 years straight, give or take, of course, with some nuances and different things added in and taken out throughout most of the beginning of my career in SF. But version 2 honestly kind of makes version 1 look a little bit JV. And that is kind of saying a lot, but that's just how it is. It's just a lot more well-rounded. It's better programming and they're both amazing. If you want to get really strong at the squat, bench, deadlift and really good at running at the same time, then I would choose version 1. If you want to be a little more well-rounded, also get strong, but kind of build more muscle, keep your joints a little bit happier, and also improve your endurance, but also get a little bit more of the Metcon style stuff, the strongman style stuff, and of course, touch on your power every week, then version 2 is great. A lot of people think like, do I need to follow version 1 before I follow version 2 or vice versa? Are they like continuations of one another? No, they are completely different programs. You could either just follow Jack Gazelle version 2, or you could just follow Jack Gazelle version 1, or you could follow version 2, then version 1, or version 1, then version 2. So that hopefully will clear up the question and give you guys some nuances in both of the programs. And yeah, you can check those out in the description if you're interested. I am going to take my sweatshirt off. It's getting warm. I always get warm when I record these things. Be right back. Next question. What are your favorite books? All right. Let's see. I'm going to go off the top of my head and maybe list like 5 of my favorite books. There are so many more, but I will list a couple that I've read recently and just some of my all-time faves, and we'll go from there. I'll just keep this, other than one book, I'll keep this in the nonfiction realm, but there's nothing wrong with reading fiction. I just usually read nonfiction. However, I do usually listen on audio to nonfiction when I go out on walks and whatnot, if I want a little break from consuming and getting tons of knowledge just crammed in my head. So a really good book I read recently is Unreasonable Hospitality by William Giarda, I believe. He is the owner of he's the former manager at a restaurant in New York City. It is called 11 Madison Park. It's like a very, very high level restaurant. And he talks all about how they went from a restaurant that was pretty decent. I think it was like 1 Michelin star and it was pretty sought after, to the best restaurant, number one restaurant in the world on the 50 best restaurant lists. And he talks about mainly what they focused on was improving their hospitality in many different ways, shapes, and forms. So if you have some sort of business, or if you work in a profession that involves hospitality and like treating people well and customer satisfaction, it would be an amazing book to read. And it is definitely, of course, biased towards the restaurant business, but it just works across many different areas of business. And also it is pretty interesting, like the behind the scenes stuff at a high end restaurant like that. I am not super nerdy about restaurants or anything like that. I have read a few Anthony Bourdain books back in the day, RIP Anthony, but I'm definitely not like about to open a restaurant or anything like that. I don't plan on doing that ever, but it is actually pretty cool to see behind the scenes of what these people do. And it is an excellent book, and it's just fresh in my mind. So I read it very recently. Going to fiction. One of the best books I've ever read is The Matterhorn, which is a book it's based on a true story. The author is a character in the book by a different name. So it's based on his experience in Vietnam. And it's a super thick, very long book. And it's probably the quickest I've ever read a book of that size in my entire life. It might be one of the longer books I've ever read. I think it's like 750 pages or something. But The Matterhorn is excellent. I would highly recommend that. It's very difficult to put down, and it's a hell of a story. The One Thing is one of my favorite books to kind of dim things down and make sure that you're focusing on the right things. Oftentimes in business and life, and actually in lots of different areas, people will focus on all the little things that maybe make a small difference before they focus on the one thing that is going to make everything else easier and make progress a lot more steady and more reliable. And this book is all about how to kind of trim your tasks down and trim your mindset to thinking about just one thing. What is one thing I can do right now that will make everything else obsolete, or that will make everything else significantly easier or less necessary to do? So if you're a business owner, or if you're about to start a business, or if you're potentially going to start a business someday, or if you're someone that tends to kind of focus their attention all over the place, which, believe me, I absolutely have this tendency as well. I like to focus on a ton of different things, and I bite off sometimes more than I can chew in many different areas of life. This will kind of bring you back to the reality and help you focus on just one thing that's going to make everything else work a lot better and a lot easier, or it's going to make everything else or multiple other things completely unnecessary, because this one thing is the most important. Deep Work is another one by Cal Newport. That is a great one for anyone who needs to do a lot of knowledge work. So if you have to do a lot of writing, if you have to do a lot of make content, if you have to do a lot of deep thinking, that really requires no distractions and really requires a lot of hard thinking and maybe even creativity and things along those lines. Deep Work is an excellent book because it kind of gives you a bunch of stories from famous and highly respected people in history, highly successful people in history, influential people. I can't remember exactly. I know he talks about Benjamin Franklin. He talks about some other really well-known people that were just generally considered like very, very good at lots of different things. It pretty much breaks down how to get into the state of the importance of deep work, as well as how to set up your environment and set up your thoughts and set up your life in order to really get a lot of good, hard, deep work done. In this day and age, I would say it's the most important right now is finding time for deep work. I personally do this first thing in the morning, every morning. I spend 2 to 3 hours on my very first task with no distractions. I'm not checking email. I'm not watching YouTube. I'm not scrolling. That's the huge thing these days is like a lot of people will sit down and work for 8 hours, but they don't get anywhere near 8 hours of actual productive work done. And deep work is great, whether you own your own business or whether you work in some other knowledge work for somebody else. It can be a great, great habit to get into and a great thing to implement into your life. You can get so much done in such a short period of time, and it's so much lower stress when you just dedicate yourself to deep work. Another classic that I recommend to pretty much everybody, regardless of who you are or what you're trying to do, is How to Win Friends and Influence People. I personally used to think that I just was kind of not very charismatic and I wasn't very good at interacting with people. And I thought that was just the way it is. And it's not like that at all. So this book is great on how to interact with people. It was originally written way back in like the 1920s, and it's been Dale Carnegie was the author. It's been updated, so it's a little bit more relevant to the current world, but all the principles really still apply. And that will really, if you feel like you are someone who might struggle during team week, or if you just feel like other people get more than you do, because even if you're more qualified than them, but they're just more charismatic and likable than you are, then this is a highly recommended read, and you will learn a lot. And it's a very, very well written book. And it's not super tactical, but it is enough to absolutely learn like some of your faults and some of the things you do wrong and some of your character weaknesses and how you can just be a more likable and more charismatic individual. Because believe it or not, being charismatic can override a bunch of different flaws. Like Donald Trump is a perfect example of this. Whether you agree with Donald Trump or not, he's one of the most charismatic individuals in existence of all time. And it's not like he's the most qualified person to be the president of the United States. I think even if you're a Trump supporter, you can agree with that. But he is incredibly charismatic. He's got like all of the charismatic traits in existence. And because of it, he has won 2 presidential elections, and he is currently our president. So that is just one example of many of why being charismatic can be very beneficial, pretty much regardless of what you want to do. I think that was 5. I'm not 100% sure, but even if it wasn't 5, that's what I'll leave it with. And hopefully you enjoy 1 or 2 of those books. And yeah, let me know in the comments what your go-to books are. I'd be interested to start a conversation. Next question, when are you hopping on Strava? So I have a Strava account, but I have not used it in years and years and years. So maybe I'll hop on it pretty soon. I usually just use my Garmin and I track everything in there. I personally think Strava can be great, but I also think it can be a little bit detrimental. I don't think it's going to be detrimental necessarily to me, but it can be detrimental to some people when they go in and they see other people performing on Strava, what other people are doing. It's just another thing that you can compare yourself to others on. And no matter what, there's always going to be someone out there who's faster than you and can run longer than you and can just be a better athlete than you. So I am all for it if you can kind of just be objective about it and track your stuff, or if you just follow it for entertainment. It's almost like a Instagram for runners, but they just basically, as far as I know, you can just see like performances and paces and routes and things along those lines. So I might hop on it soon. Maybe for the last couple months of my ultra prep, I'll get back on Strava and start logging my stuff, but no promises. If you like Strava, send it. Next question. What do you miss most about SF? So I miss a lot of things, but I would say hands down, the number one thing is just showing up every day and working with the boys. I definitely still have some friends that I worked with, but it's one thing to just be friends with someone and text them, call them, maybe meet up once in a while. It's another thing to go to work every single day with a bunch of like-minded, hard-charging individuals and just kind of work together for one goal. So I would say that is by far the aspect of it that I miss the most. Of course, going to the range, jumping out of planes, deploying, going and doing cool stuff also is amazing. And I don't do that shit anymore. But I would say the cohesion and the camaraderie is by far the thing I miss most. Even as an introverted individual, I definitely really enjoy time when I am solo in solitude. And I am probably better performing when it's just me and my computer and my thoughts and whatever I'm doing for a workout. But I do really like that cohesion, and it's really cool to be around some of the most badass and hardest charging individuals on the planet every single day. It just pushes you to go harder and do more and never settle for average. So that would probably be number one. Next question. How is life going for you? Any goals this year other than the ultra? Life's going great, man. Thank you so much for asking. I appreciate that. Other goals beyond the ultra? Not necessarily. When I finish the ultra, most likely, of course, this could change if I run the ultra and really just love it and I am thirsty for more immediately. But for the most part, my thought is that I'm going to take a little break from high volume running and start focusing a little bit more on my strength numbers and my muscle mass and getting back into the gym more frequently, and probably going back up to like 4 or 5 days a week lifting. I'll probably keep running. I will definitely keep running as long as I'm healthy. but I'll keep it in the 20 to 30 mile per week range, not the 50 to 60 mile per week range that I'll be hitting as I get into the ultra. So no specific goals necessarily. I do have some business goals. I kind of like keep those to myself and my Google documents, but nothing in particular. I definitely want to continue to release really good content. I really want to up my YouTube game. I've kind of taken a little bit of a break from YouTube. I know I have not been a YouTuber for very long. By the way, I make organic YouTube videos that are not podcasts. Of course, I post all of these on YouTube as well, and I post clips on YouTube. But also I started to do actual YouTube videos. And right now I just have so much on my plate and I have not gotten around to making many YouTube videos recently. So I absolutely want to increase the frequency of that. I plan on bringing an editor or someone else to help me after the fact. Basically, it takes a long time. It takes a lot of work, not just to film and prepare and film the actual videos, whether it's a podcast or a YouTube. These podcasts don't take a ton of prep because I just go off my phone. But on the back end, I have to go through and edit them. I have to upload them. I have to write in descriptions and so on and so forth. Lots of different things behind the scenes that just take a lot of time. And when it's just me, and I also have lots and lots of clients that are relying on me, that pay me, where I have to give them most of my attention, it's just, honestly, I'm kind of making excuses, but it's a lot. So it may not seem like a lot, a 20-minute video. I posted on YouTube. It's a 20-minute video, but behind the scenes, that took 8, 10, 12 hours or multiple days if it's one of a more complicated one where I have to do a lot of prep beforehand. So I definitely want to get back into making more frequent YouTube videos and really enhance and kind of take that a little bit more seriously over the next few months. But December and January were both very, very high volume client intake months, client onboarding months. So that gets most of my attention. And I only have so much energy and so much time and so many hours per day that I can dedicate to a lot of different things. So because I've been consistent with the podcast for basically since it started, that is kind of my number one priority, making sure I get approximately one podcast out per week and post on Instagram every day, at least once. And of course, I also am like training 12 to 13 to 14 hours a week at this point. So I wish I could do a little bit more, and I plan to in the future. I plan on bringing on some help to give me some more time and some bandwidth to make better content and make more content, but nothing super set in stone and nothing specific that I'll talk about on here. But I do appreciate you asking about how I'm doing. I'm doing really well. Hope you're doing well too. Next question, feasibility of hypertrophy when averaging 40 to 50 miles per week, provided macros are on point. It is definitely feasible. Is it optimal? No, that's a lot of running and you'll have to eat a lot of food in order to make gains on that many miles per week. But coincidentally, I am about there. Actually last week was just 52 miles and I'm not making gains, but I'm staying about the same. I'm maintaining and I'm only lifting twice per week. And I am pretty dialed in with my nutrition and I get pretty damn good sleep. I take it very seriously, but it's not perfect. I don't track. I probably could maybe gain a little bit of muscle if I wanted to, if I tracked and I was way more diligent with my nutrition. I definitely make sure I eat enough, but I just use the mirror and the scale and how I'm feeling to kind of gauge whether I'm eating enough. Now, if you are very dialed in with your macros and you have pretty solid genetics and your overall training is reasonable. So like if you're running 40, 50 miles a week and lifting 5-6 days per week, that's just too much for pretty much anyone. But if you're lifting 2 or 3 days per week and you're running that 40 to 50 miles and your running intensity is reasonable, then it is definitely possible. How much are you going to gain? Probably not all that much. I would say if you really want to gain considerable muscle, I would dial that back to like 20 to 30 miles per week. And you can still absolutely make running improvements on 20 to 30 miles per week. You just have to be a little bit more intentional with it and really prioritize certain types of runs that are going to move the needle forward most. Of course, still easy runs definitely are important, but a little bit less percentage of easy runs and a little bit higher percentage of speed stuff. That would probably be a little bit better, but at the same time, I would not completely discount it. But unfortunately, there's only so many different things that we can improve on at the same time. And the more you try to improve on, this is pretty much in any area of life. The more general you are, or the more different hats that you wear, or the more different goals that you're chasing, especially goals that don't support each other, like running and getting jacked as fuck. they don't support each other like directly. Like if you wanted to get really, really jacked, you would not also run a shit ton. Vice versa, if you wanted to get really, really good at running, you wouldn't lift a ton of weights. You would not go to the gym all the time and really try and get jacked. So they don't really support each other. And the more things you have going on at the same time, the less of a delta you can expect to improve on all those things. So just kind of keep that in mind, stay realistic about it, and continue working. But if you don't get as jacked, quite as jacked as you want, or if you run this for a little while and you notice that you're beat up or you're overtrained or just really fatigued, or you're feeling lots of symptoms of maybe that your body's a little bit overstressed, then I would probably consider which one is more important to you, running that many miles or getting jacked, and dial back the other one a little bit to make it so that you can actually see gains and do so sustainably and not just burn yourself out. So best of luck. Next question, how to stay dialed in for training, sleep, and diet for SFAS when in the field constantly. Yeah, so this is another tough one. Your best bet is to just quit the Army. No, your best bet is to stay as dialed in as you possibly can when you're not in the field. Of course, there are certain situations where you're just going to be in the field, maybe even more often than you're going to be not in the field. And it's unfortunate. But plenty of guys in the past have kind of had a schedule like this, and they've gone to selection and been successful. Really, your best bet is to not overly fixate on, oh man, this is so suboptimal. Like, what am I ever going to do? And kind of give yourself that narrative that like, no matter what, you're kind of just not going to be as prepared as you possibly could be. Even if that is the case, your best bet should be to think, what can I do when I'm not in the field, sleep wise, training wise, recovery wise, nutrition wise, to maximize the progress that I can possibly make while I'm not in the field. When you're in the field, it should be, what can I do? What can I bring? How can I act? What type of interventions or strategies can I have when I am in the field to make it so that's a little bit less detrimental to my progress? So not in the field, I've talked about this a million times. Make sure you're getting great sleep. Make sure your training is reasonable, but also effective and challenging. Make sure you're eating plenty of food. Make sure you're eating plenty of protein, carbohydrates, hydrating well, managing your stress well, and being very, very consistent across the board. When you are in the field, you are, of course, going to be a little bit short on resources, but you hopefully could do maybe some calisthenics. Maybe you can bring a kettlebell. Maybe you can bring a TRX strap. Maybe you can use water cans and practice your carries. Maybe you can do some ruck squats or ruck lunges or good mornings. Maybe you can go on a periodic ruck. Maybe you can go on a periodic run. Maybe you can bring some protein powder out to the field, because MREs, they might give you enough calories, but they are not going to give you enough protein. So having a protein supplement, protein bars, protein shakes, beef jerky, whatever it is, canned tuna, canned fish, and at least keep your protein numbers to where you need them. And maybe, if you're not getting enough MREs, you could also bring some carbohydrate powder, or you could bring some other snacks that are higher in carbohydrates that'll keep you fueled and keep your calorie count where you need it to be. Of course, sleep is most likely going to be a factor that you really don't have a ton of control over, but at least do your best to try and stay as consistent with sleep as you possibly can, and try and do the right things before you go to sleep. Try and do the right things after you wake up. Of course, you're going to be outside, so you're going to be getting sunlight throughout the day. So that's good, but it's definitely not perfect. However, if you say you're going in the field on average 1 week per month, maybe even 2 weeks per month, that's 2 weeks per month where you can get after it and train really hard and recover really well and make a lot of progress forward. When you go out in the field, even if you're taking a slight step back and maybe just doing some maintenance, just bare minimum, but still eating enough, still at least getting enough sleep to get by, not living off caffeine, that's another huge one. Even though you're not going to be making progress during those times, you still can maintain most of the progress you made. So maybe you have to start your selection prep a little bit earlier. Instead of doing a 3-month selection prep, maybe you do a 4 or a 5-month selection prep, because a couple of those months cumulatively, you're not going to be able to optimally prepare throughout that time. So do your very best. Try to think about what you can do, not what you can't do. Control what you can control, and just know that people have done this before you and been successful. Even if you could otherwise show up a little bit more prepared, if you didn't have all this time in the field, it's still very doable. and you just kind of got to suck it up and do your very best and try and cover all of your bases that you possibly can, whether in the field or outside the field. And best of luck to you. Next question, are protein farts indicative of adequate protein intake or just GI distress? The latter. So a lot of people think protein farts are totally normal, and they are common, but they're not normal. If you have these terrible rancid smelling protein farts, it's a great sign that you might be having enough protein, but it's an excellent sign that you are not digesting something very well. But there are many different things that potentially can cause GI distress beyond just taking in too much protein, or it may not even be the protein itself. It may not be the amount of protein. It may not even be the fact that you're taking a certain type of protein. However, for some people, if they have a sensitivity to dairy, or particularly if they take too much whey, they can experience issues. Plant protein is another one. Plant protein can be great, but it's also has a tendency to cause GI distress if you have too much of it. So I would absolutely look into everything that you're eating, not just your protein. But I would also consider not having too much protein in the form of supplementation. Usually whey isolate is a lot less rough on the gut and the GI system than whey concentrate. Some people, though, don't do well with whey at all. You could consider beef protein. You could consider egg protein. They make supplements with beef protein and egg protein, and that might help you quite a bit if you do have a sensitivity to whey. If you know you're sensitive to other forms of dairy, it probably is the whey, or at least partially the whey. But you really want to just focus on eating whole foods that you digest well and that you handle well. And just know that these nasty smelling farts and the GI distress is not normal. It's just common, but it can be intervened with in multiple different ways. I've talked recently quite a bit about gut health, but it could be the fact that you're sensitive to something that you're eating on a regular basis that you just are unaware of. It could be the fact that you're eating a lot of generally poorly digesting foods, like a ton of wheat or a ton of raw vegetables. Those things are totally fine, but they can be a little bit rough on the digestive tract. I actually just made a post about best carb supplements. Most of them are very easy digesting. It included white rice. It included sweet potatoes, regular potatoes. Oats are kind of a hit or miss thing. Some people do really well with oats. Some people don't. Fruit is usually a really good one. Like I said, raw vegetables for some people are totally fine. For other people, you either need to cook vegetables or you need to reduce how many vegetables you're eating. It really just depends on your underlying gut health and its permeability and lots of different factors. So the gut is a very, very complicated part of the body, very complicated system of the body, probably the second most complicated behind the brain. And even people who spend their entire lives obsessively studying the gut don't have it all figured out. So I would consider, if you're eating a ton of whey, or if you're taking in a ton of whey protein or a ton of just supplemental protein, I would consider dialing that back and replacing some of it with whole foods. Usually red meat or other ruminant animals are the best digesting type of meat. Chicken's usually fine. Eggs, some people are sensitive to eggs. Not everyone is, though. So, you kind of got to be very in tune with what you're eating and how it's making you feel and how it's affecting your gut health. And honestly, for some people, the best way to do that is a elimination diet. You can look up the paleo AIP. That's a pretty good elimination diet that you could put in temporarily. And then you start reintroducing foods afterwards, and kind of one at a time, and seeing which ones affect you and how you feel after eating them. That is definitely a little bit more of an advanced and kind of a shitty thing to go through. But for some people, it's life-changing, especially if you just have gut health issues and you can't figure out where it's at. Other options, you could consult a holistic health or naturopathic doctor professional, and they can kind of run tests on you, and they probably can give you a better idea without doing the elimination diet. Although some of these people may recommend elimination diets. There's lots of different tests that you can take to kind of see what you're sensitive to. But honestly, if you're more in tune, if you're just very in tune with pretty much everything that you eat, and you ask yourself 30 minutes after, 60 minutes after, even a day after, hey, how do I feel? Like, sometimes it does take more than a day to start feeling these symptoms. Sometimes it's right away. Other times it's not. And most people are just not really in tune with it, or they think that because everyone has these protein farts when they eat too much protein, or they think it's too much protein, they think it's completely fine, and it's not. It's not going to kill you, but also it is potentially negatively affecting your gut health in such a way that even all the protein you're eating, maybe you're not even assimilating a good portion of it. And that's obviously not what you want. So kind of jumped around there, but definitely something I would look into and consider intervening with, or consider hiring out help to get to the bottom of it. Next question, we'll hit 2 more questions. Actually, we'll hit 3. This one's pretty quick. When you used to track macros, would you weigh your food raw or cooked? I would generally weigh it raw. And that is because of the cooking process with some foods. Maybe it takes on water. Maybe it changes the weight in some way, shape, or form while you're cooking it. And it's always going to be a little bit different. However, it's okay to weigh food cooked so long as you're always doing it that way. Whichever you choose, just do it the same way every time, and you're going to be good to go. Because even if it's not perfectly accurate, it's still going to be precise. So if you're weighing sometimes raw, sometimes cooked, then it's going to be inaccurate and imprecise. So they're not going to be like consistent. The measurements are not going to be consistent. But if you had to choose, I would weigh food raw and just keep it like that. But, you know, if you've been doing cooked weighing for a long period of time and that's all you do, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Even if you're off by 100 calories, 200 calories, at least you're eating the same amount of calories, and you can kind of adjust up or down from there just by watching your body weight, your performance, how you feel, looking at yourself in the mirror, and so on and so forth. Next question, simple and generic mobility and stretching routine for the average soldier in person. Okay, so if you've been listening for a while, you know my take on mobility. The best way to improve your mobility is to lift weights with a full range of motion, because mobility has a strength component. It's not just how you can move in a range of motion. It's how you can control that range of motion. It's your active range of motion. So if you think about it, if you bend over and touch your toes, that's kind of testing your hamstring flexibility. But because gravity is pulling you down, it's not testing your active range of motion. However, if you actually you lay down your back and you bring your leg up towards the ceiling, basically a straight leg raise, that's actually testing your mobility, not just your hamstrings, but other things as well. That's your active range of motion. So knowing that, because you want strength in the range of motion, you should absolutely lift with a full range of motion. And if you're not doing that, but you're spending all this time on the side doing mobility, then you're missing the forest for the trees. However, that's not the only way. Of course, you can increase your mobility in other ways as well. And for some people, lifting with a full range of motion is just not quite enough. To include me, I need to do a little bit extra mobility in order for me to be as mobile as I want to be. Do I do it all the time? Not necessarily, but that's just the case. I'm a very genetically immobile person. Some people are very genetically mobile. Some people are very genetically overmobile or hypermobile. And oftentimes that can create a lot of problems as well. So first thing you want to ask yourself is, what are you doing mobility for, and what specifically do you want to improve your mobility, or whether you have known mobility restrictions in certain joints. Commonly, the shoulders, the hips, and the ankles, and sometimes the upper back thorax area are very immobile across a lot of different people. So assuming you have some sort of restriction in one of those areas, honestly, my favorite way to improve ankle mobility is to do heavy calf raises where you pause for a very long time at the bottom. That will increase your dorsiflexion, and also it will kill another bird with the same stone and improve your calf strength and your calf size, hopefully over time, if you're consistent with it. To increase plantar flexion, so pointing your toe down away from your shins, you can do the opposite. You can do machine tib raises or kettlebell tib raises where you, again, hold that bottom position for a long period of time, and that will have another benefit of improving your tib strength. And by the way, both of those can also help you be more resilient with running. Hip mobility, my favorite way to do it is to get down into a deep squat and just kind of hold it. You can use a counterweight in front of you. So say you want to improve your squat depth, for example. Maybe you can't get as deep as you'd like. That is usually a function of ankle mobility, aka dorsiflexion, bringing your feet up towards your shin and or driving your knee out over your toe, as well as hip mobility, external rotation and abduction, bringing your leg away from you. So the best way to do that, honestly, is to get into a squat position more frequently throughout the day. I'm going to talk about like the lazy man, easy mobility drill, like you said, simple and generic, that I recommend to most people because of the parts of the body that are typically the least mobile, that need the most work, and because it's more functional to the movements that people need more mobility for. So number one, get into a deep squat a couple times per day. You can grab a counterweight, like a 25-pound plate or a kettlebell or a dumbbell. You don't need that, but you can. It kind of helps you get a little bit deeper, and just hold it for a little bit. You can kind of rock back and forth. You can drive each knee out over your toe. You can put your arms inside your legs and kind of push out. You can push out and then with your legs kind of adduct, push back in using your groin and hold that. You could do that a couple times per day for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds. You could have a goal of spending 3-4 minutes a day in a squat position. That will absolutely improve not only your mobility, but in your squat depth, but it'll also just make you more comfortable in the bottom position of a squat that almost everyone skips because it's hard to get into and they have to use less weight. But that is also the most important part of the lift for muscle growth, as well as improving your mobility. So you want to be able to get down into that deep squat. It's going to look a little different for everyone. Everyone's got different limb lengths. And maybe right now you're not quite able to get super deep, but over time with practice, you can get deeper. So that's a great one. I already mentioned the calf raise for the ankle mobility. For shoulders, one of my favorite ways to do this is hang from a pull-up bar. So you could have a routine where you go out into your garage or wherever you have a pull-up bar in your house, or even if you're at the gym, you do this before your training session and after. You go to the pull-up bar, you hang for a minute. Then you get down into a squat, you hold it for a minute. Then you go to a pull-up bar, you hang for 45 seconds. Then you get down into a squat, you hold it for 45 seconds, so on and so forth. Maybe you do that twice a day. That is a great way to do it. It's also going to improve your grip strength. It's also going to just get you more comfortable in the overhead position, which a lot of people struggle with. A lot of people get banged up shoulders, elbows from doing overhead presses, as well as vertical pulls. So pull-ups. Pull-ups, believe it or not, they're a great exercise, but a lot of people struggle with them because they don't have great mobility for them. When you hang from a pull-up bar a lot, it seems super simple and rudimentary, and it kind of is, but also it'll help you be more comfortable in that position. Another one I really like is overhead kettlebell or dumbbell walks, where you just grab a kettlebell, put it overhead, and you walk. You can stand still if you want, or march, or you can just walk back and forth. A lot of people, believe it or not, can't do that. And that's going to improve your overhead stability and allow you to hang out in that position for a lot longer. It's going to make your shoulders less susceptible to injury when you are doing vertical pulls, vertical pushes, and it's super simple. I like to do that kind of at the beginning of the workout. Sometimes I do it, just go out in my garage and I kind of add this to my lazy man mobility routine. Believe it or not, those are like the 4 things that I mainly do for mobility: ankles, hips, overhead, which kind of covers your thoracic mobility a little bit as well. Of course, there are tons more. You can do shoulder dislocations. If you know your shoulders are really tight or not very mobile, you can do shoulder dislocations with either a band or a dowel or PVC pipe, whatever it is. You can do 90-90s, active 90-90s, where you sit on the floor and you basically have your legs in 2 matching, mirroring 90-degree angle positions, and you drive that front leg. You lean out over the front leg and you push that leg into the ground. You're basically contracting your glute med, and that's a great way to improve your hip mobility. But man, there's so many different options. But at the same time, again, your first thought and your first goal should be to work on increasing your range of motion so that you are more mobile. With load, you're able to control bigger ranges of motion with your joints in the right position, and you're more stable in those positions. It's going to help you not only open yourself up to better hypertrophy, because you're going to be able to get in lengthened position of every movement, but also it's going to improve your mobility and it's going to improve your strength in that position. And that is most people, that is the main reason they want to get more mobile, is so that they can go through bigger ranges of motion with training or whatever they are trying to improve on. Usually you're not trying to go and be a gymnast or a Cirque du Soleil dancer, in which case you would need a shit ton of mobility and you have to have certain genetics to have that type of mobility. Usually it's just so you can better put yourself in athletic positions that you are training to improve. And honestly, most of that mobility comes from getting into those positions with load and doing so reasonably and trying to increase your range of motion and your strength in that range of motion over time. So that would be my down and dirty mobility routine: lift with a full range of motion, do a couple exercises, deep squats, hang from a pull-up bar, deep calf raises with a pause, and whatever else you need. That's kind of a case-by-case basis, and there's tons and tons of different options. Next and last question: any good energy drinks out there that don't have a lot of crap in them? As far as I know, no. I'm sure there definitely are. There's the Chris Williamson from Modern Wisdom. If you don't listen to that, I definitely recommend. It's one of the bigger podcasts in existence. It's great. But he came out with something called New Tonic. I have not tried it, but I looked at the ingredients list and it's mostly pretty damn good stuff.
with a few exceptions, but it's really hard to make a legit energy drink that doesn't have anything that potentially someone might look at and be like, oh, but that's a chemical. So, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other energy drinks similar to that are relatively harmless. And also that energy drink does not have a ton of caffeine. Most energy drinks that you're going to really feel primarily have tons of caffeine and B vitamins and like taurine, which are not bad, but it's just, that's the main thing you're going to feel. The other things are usually for taste and preservation. And some of those things are not the best things to be consuming on a regular basis. So honestly, I would recommend to get your caffeine fix, black coffee. You could even add, I would rather someone add creamer and maybe a dollop of sugar to their coffee than drink an energy drink or two every single day. An occasional energy drink, not going to hurt you at all. But some people drink 2, 3, 4 energy drinks a day. And it's not just the caffeine from that's the big problem. It's all the other stuff that's coming with it. And a lot of people get kidney issues, liver issues from too much energy drink consumption. It depends on the person. It depends on your genetics. It depends on what type of energy drink it is. But it's just a consideration that I would make. And this is coming from someone who used to drink way too many energy drinks. When I was in the military, I probably had 1 or 2 most days. And that is definitely not ideal. I've probably had 3 to 5 energy drinks since I've gotten out, and I got out in almost 2 years ago. So now I just stick to coffee. You could also just do caffeine in pill form. That's also another great option. But most pre-workouts, most energy drinks are full of things that you don't necessarily want to be taking in on a regular basis. But again, in moderation, not a huge deal. And unfortunately, I don't have a great answer as to which ones specifically are the least harmless for your overall health. So definitely read the ingredients. And if there's like 35 things listed in the nutrition facts, that's probably not the best thing to be putting in your body, especially if you just, of course, this is not like a scientific thing. This is something that a lot of zealots and charlatans who are like all natural talk about. But if there's 35 ingredients and you can't pronounce 32 of them, or you've never heard of 32 of them, and you're not interested in looking into them, then that's probably a decent sign that it's not the best thing to be putting into your body regularly. So that's what I would consider. But honestly, coffee has lots of great health benefits. Coffee's great for your liver health. Even decaf coffee is great. There's lots of antioxidants. Honestly, for a lot of people in America, their main source of antioxidants is their daily coffee because they just eat such shitty food. And the coffee is like the only thing that's giving them any sort of nutrients. So that's what I would stick to. Caffeine pills are totally fine. If you go caffeine powder, just be careful. Make sure you're getting the dose right. You can definitely overdo it, and that's not good at all. But pills and coffee are both excellent, or some more like natural caffeine, like green tea, much lower caffeine, black tea, a little higher caffeine, but those are also totally fine. Usually if you're cutting yourself off at 300-ish, 400 milligrams of caffeine per day, you're doing pretty well, but everyone's different. And if you're drinking it too late in the day, and this is a different time for everyone metabolizes caffeine different. The half-life of caffeine on average in the average person is 5 hours, but that's the average. So maybe the half-life of caffeine is longer for you. Maybe it's shorter for you, but either way, having caffeine in the afternoon, no matter who you are, is going to negatively affect your sleep. If it's within 8-ish hours of sleep, even if you don't perceive it to, even if you don't feel like it's affecting your sleep, it most likely is. So just tread carefully. But yeah, that's it, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'll be back soon with another episode. Hope everyone has an awesome week. Till then, Terminator out.